At Thanksgiving, my grandma stood at the airport gate with her suitcase packed, her heart full, and her name missing from the passenger list after giving my dad 20 zero to make the family trip of a lifetime happen. If you've ever felt like love in your family came with conditions, or wondered what quiet betrayal really looks like, this story will stay with you. Because sometimes, the people closest to us cross lines we never imagined, and this time, someone finally said, enough. My name is Emma. I'm 28 years old, a registered nurse living in Boise, Idaho. And for most of my life, I've felt like I didn't quite belong in my own family. On paper, my family looked perfect. My dad, Charles Whitmore, was a successful real estate agent. Always polished, always networking. My mom, Deborah, was the picture of perfection, well-dressed, well-connected, and obsessed with social status. We lived in a nice neighborhood, drove the right cars, showed up to the right events, but behind closed doors, everything felt cold. Family dinners weren't moments of connection. They were silent performances. Conversations were either surface level or sharp. If I spoke too much, I was told I was being too emotional. If I stayed quiet, they called me moody. Either way, it never felt safe to be me. But there was one person who made all of that bearable. Grandma Lillian. She was my dad's mother, his exact opposite. A retired school teacher who lived in a modest one-story house in Meridian. No fancy dinners, no designer, anything. Just warmth. And cookies. Lots of cookies. Growing up, she was my safe place. Every summer, while my parents went on adults-only cruises or spa getaways, I stayed with her. We baked cinnamon bread from scratch, watered her hydrangeas in the morning sun, and watched old black and white movies on VHS. She hummed Billie Holiday while folding laundry, and always had an extra quilt ready when the weather turned cold. She called me Sunshine, even on the days I cried. And I called her my real home. There were no expectations with her. No critiques. No conditions. She didn't care if I got a B in math or if my shoes weren't polished. She cared if I was kind. If I felt safe. If I ate enough. She saved every birthday card I ever made her. Her fridge was covered in my clumsy drawings, even when I was 17 and thought they were embarrassing. I remember one summer, I was upset about not being invited to my cousin's birthday party. My parents told me to get over it, but Grandma handed me a paintbrush and said, "Paint how you feel. That's how real artists begin." I painted a blue sky with one lonely cloud. She hung it in the hallway like it belonged in a gallery. Even as I grew older and moved into my own place, I visited her every week. I'd bring groceries, fix her Wi-Fi, or just sit with her on the porch drinking tea. Sometimes we didn't even talk. We just watched the wind move through the trees. What made Grandma different wasn't just that she was kind, it was that she saw, people really saw them. And in a family where everyone seemed to care more about appearances than actual connection, her love was rare. But here's the thing. I always had this quiet fear that my parents resented the bond I had with her. Like her softness made them uncomfortable. Like maybe they felt threatened by how much she loved me. They never said it out loud, but I saw it. I saw it in the way my dad's jaw would tighten whenever Grandma praised me in front of him, or how my mom's smile would shrink whenever I said I'd be spending Thanksgiving with Grandma instead of going to Aspen with them. And yet, I still never thought they'd actually hurt her. Not intentionally. Not in a way that would leave a scar. But I was wrong. See, the truth is, love in my family always came with strings. And Grandma, despite her wisdom, didn't always see the strings pulling tight around her. She wanted to believe the best in people. Especially her own children. That's why, when my dad and Aunt Dana showed up that Thanksgiving with big smiles, suitcases, and a plan for a once-in-a-lifetime family trip to Europe, she lit up like a child. It had been years since anyone had invited her on anything. I could see that hope in her eyes, that longing to be chosen. Finally, just once. She didn't question the sudden warmth. She didn't hesitate when they asked her to help pay for the trip. Because for her, being included was worth any price. Even 20, 0. And that's where this story really begins. Not with the airport, not with the betrayal, but with a woman who gave everything she had just to feel like she mattered to the people she loved most. This isn't just a story about what they did to her. It's about what she meant to me. And how sometimes protecting the people we love means standing up heaven if it's against our own blood. And trust me, I never thought it would go as far as it did. That Thanksgiving evening, the dining room felt warmer than usual. Not because of the turkey or Grandma's famous sweet potato casserole, but because of the sudden attention my family was giving her. Too much attention. The kind that feels staged, like a play everyone rehearsed but forgot to tell you about. Dad kept smiling across the table, almost too wide. Aunt Dana was oddly chatty. Even my usually silent cousins, Brooke and Tyler, looked up from their phones now and then to mumble something about how cool Europe would be. Grandma sat at the head of the table, stirring her tea with slow, thoughtful circles. She looked surprised, but hopeful. That was the part that broke my heart, a little how easily her hope returned, like it had been waiting just below the surface. Halfway through dinner, Dad leaned back in his chair and said, "You know, I've been thinking. It's time we did something big as a family. Like a real memory-making kind of trip. Rome, Paris, London. Just us, all together for once." His voice was smooth, like a salesman warming up for the pitch. Aunt Dana jumped in right on cue. "Mom, you've never even left the country. This would be huge for you." Grandma gave a soft smile and replied, "That does sound lovely, but I'm not sure I could keep up with all that walking." Dad waved off her concern. "We'll take it easy. Hotels with elevators, wheelchairs if needed, and hay-room service every night if you want." The table chuckled. Grandma looked down into her cup, and for a moment, I could tell she was picturing it. The Eiffel Tower, soft beds, her family around her. She wanted it to be real. Then came the ask, the real reason behind the charm and laughter. Dad said casually, like it didn't matter, "We'd just need a bit more to lock everything in. The bookings are due next week, and we've already covered most of it." He let the words hang. "How much more?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Only 20, he said, still smiling. "Grandma's always wanted us to travel as a family. I figured she'd love to help make it happen." The room fell quiet for a second. Then Grandma nodded, slow but certain. "If it brings everyone together, of course." I didn't say a word. Not then, because in that moment, she looked happy. She looked needed. And after years of being pushed to the side, she believed maybe for the first time in a long time that her children wanted her there, that they valued her, that she finally had a seat at the table, not just as a guest, but as family. The next morning, I heard her on the phone with the bank. She was reading off account numbers, her voice calm but careful. I stood in the hallway, not wanting to interrupt, fists clenched at my sides. I wanted to scream, to pull the phone from her hand and ask why she had to pay for her own inclusion. But I didn't. All I said was, "Grandma, are you sure?" She smiled at me, the way she always did when she was trying to hold back emotion. "Honey, they're finally including me. It's worth every penny." That afternoon, she pulled out her suitcase from the closet. It was small and slightly faded of those carry-ons with peeling corners and a loose zipper. She dusted it off and started folding clothes inside, humming softly as she worked. I watched her tuck in sweaters, a pair of soft shoes, and a small bottle of lavender lotion. Then she placed her passport on top, like a final promise to herself. She hadn't used it in years. "I'm packing light," she said. "Don't want to slow anyone down." I nodded, even though my chest was tight. Something didn't feel right. Not just because of the money, but because the whole thing had unfolded too quickly, too perfectly. Like a plan that had been set long before the invitation was ever offered. But Grandma didn't see it that way. She was glowing. She talked about the food in Italy, the gardens in Paris, the museums in London. She even started looking up French phrases on her phone, asking me how to say, "Where's the restroom?" and "Do you have decaf tea?" For 3 days, it was like watching someone come alive again. And as much as my instinct screamed at me, I didn't want to take that from her. I just hoped quietly, desperately, that I was wrong. The morning of the trip, the house buzzed with energy. Suitcases by the door, coffee brewing, voices echoing down the hall. Grandma wore her soft gray sweater and a string of faux pearls she hadn't taken out in years. She looked elegant, nervous, and proud all at once. "Do I look okay for Paris?" she asked me, half joking. I nodded and hugged her tightly. "You look beautiful," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad pulled up in an oversized rental van, honking twice like it was a parade. Everyone piled in: Aunt Dana, the cousins, even my mom for once. I sat up front next to Grandma. She held her purse in her lap the entire ride, fingers tapping lightly over the zipper. It was the same purse she carried to church, weddings, and the hospital when she came to visit me after long shifts. "Everything important's in here," she said softly. "Wallet, passport, and peppermints." I smiled, but my stomach was turning. At the airport, things moved fast. Bags dropped, boarding passes printed, security lines winding like snakes. Dad led the charge, holding his phone up like a tour guide. "Everyone stick together," he called. "I've got everything organized." Grandma kept close, her steps slower than the rest, but she was smiling. I stayed right beside her, just in case. When we reached the gate, Dad stepped ahead to speak with the airline agent. He handed over a folder thick with documents. The rest of us stood behind, chatting quietly, killing time. Then I noticed something odd. Dad's voice was getting lower. The airline agent's eyebrows raised slightly. She looked from Dad, to us, to her screen, then back again. Finally, she said, loud enough for us all to hear, "I'm sorry, sir, but I only see 7 passengers confirmed, not 8. I froze. There were 8 of us. Grandma was number 8. Dad chuckled awkwardly. "Oh, that's right. My mom isn't flying today. Change of plans." His words dropped like a bomb. Grandma blinked. "What?" she asked, gently. "I thought we told you," Dad said, turning to her like it was no big deal. "We had to rearrange the bookings. It was just getting too complicated with your meds, the walking, the schedule. We figured it'd be easier for you to stay. We'll bring you souvenirs." No one moved. No one spoke. Not even Aunt Dana. Grandma didn't understand. "But I packed. I gave you the money." Her voice cracked on that last part. Dad looked around nervously, clearly wanting to avoid a scene. "We'll use it for the next trip. Promise. You'll be more comfortable at home anyway." I felt everything inside me snap. "Are you serious right now?" I asked, stepping forward. "You took her money and planned this the whole time?" He tried to laugh it off, said I was being dramatic, but the look on Grandma's face said everything. Her eyes didn't fill with tears right away. It was worse. She looked numb, like something inside her had quietly shut off. I grabbed her hand. "You're not staying here. Not like this." Dad shook his head. "Emma, this isn't your business." "No," I said, loud and clear. "This is exactly my business." I turned to the airline agent. "Can you check if there's still a seat on this flight? I'll pay. She's coming." The woman hesitated, then typed quickly, "There's one left in economy." "I'll take it," I said without thinking. Dad tried to protest, but I wasn't listening anymore. Grandma was still holding her purse tightly, her hand shaking in mine. "She trusted you," I said to him, my voice low. "You made her feel like she mattered, and then you left her at the gate." He didn't respond. Not really. Just shrugged and walked off like it wasn't his problem anymore. Minutes later, I was pushing Grandma's carry-on down the jet bridge, my other hand wrapped gently around her arm. She hadn't said much, just kept whispering, "I really thought they wanted me there." I looked her straight in the eyes. "I do, and I always will." The plane took off with 7 people excited for a European adventure, and one woman who realized that her worth didn't depend on their invitation. Grandma and I landed in Paris just after sunrise. The sky outside the plane windows was a soft gold. the clouds painted in quiet pinks. She stared out in silence, hands resting in her lap, her face still carrying the shock of what had happened. But slowly, as the wheels touched down and the city came into view, I saw a flicker of something else wonder. She turned to me and smiled, just barely. "I never thought I'd see this place," she whispered. We took our time through the airport, no rushing, no chaos. I booked us a small hotel near the river, far from the crowds. It wasn't fancy, certainly not what Dad had promised, but it was quiet, clean, and ours. The woman at the front desk spoke gentle English and brought us tea as we checked in. Grandma kept looking around the lobby like it was some kind of dream. "I should be angry," she said as we rode the elevator up. "But right now, I just feel free." Our days became simple adventures. We visited gardens instead of museums, bakeries instead of tourist traps. One morning, we sat on a bench in the Luxembourg Gardens, watching children float sailboats in the fountain. Grandma leaned back, closed her eyes, and said, "This feels like peace." She bought a scarf from a street vendor bright blue, with tiny white stars, wore it every day. She even tried escargot once, grimaced, then laughed so hard she cried, "Well, now I can say I've done it." We didn't talk much about the airport incident. I didn't push, but on our third night, while eating warm croissants on the hotel balcony, she spoke up. "I think I always knew they saw me as a burden. I just never wanted to believe it. I didn't know what to say." So I reached for her hand and held it. That was enough. She told me stories I'd never heard before about raising my dad alone while Grandpa was in the Navy, about the year she worked 3 jobs just to keep the house, about how she used to cry in the pantry so no one would see. She laughed at herself sometimes. "You get old and people think you're fragile, but I've held a lot more than people realize." The next morning, we took a river cruise along the Seine. The sun was high, the water sparkling. Grandma wore her blue scarf and a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. She leaned over the railing and said, "I didn't need to be part of their trip. I needed to take my own." By the end of the week, she walked a little straighter. Her eyes were brighter. She asked me to take her photo in front of the Eiffel Tower not once, but 3 times, each time with a different pose. One with her arms wide open, one with a peace sign, and one just smiling into the wind. She asked me, "Do I look happy in these?" I told her, "You look like you belong here." We flew back to Idaho the following Monday. No one was waiting at the airport. No welcome home signs. No calls. Grandma didn't seem surprised. She just said, "I'll bake something tomorrow. Maybe lemon cake. Haven't done that in years." And she did. I came over the next day, and the house smelled like sugar and zest and something soft and safe. A week later, she called the bank and asked to freeze the remaining funds in her account. When they asked why, she said, "Because I'm finally spending my money on me." She started painting again, took a beginner's yoga class, bought a new chair for her porch, and waved at every neighbor who passed. And slowly, she stopped waiting for invitations that never came. As for my dad and the rest of them, they returned from Europe a few days after we did, posted dozens of photos online, not a single one with Grandma's name. Aunt Dana sent a quick text. "Hope you're well. Let's catch up soon." Grandma never replied. Because the truth was, she didn't need to. She had found something far more valuable than a vacation or an apology. She had found herself again. The seasons changed quickly after we got back. Leaves turned golden, then vanished. Snow came early that year. I'd visit Grandma often sometimes with groceries, sometimes with nothing but time. We'd sit at her kitchen table, drinking tea, her blue scarf always nearby like a little reminder of who she'd become. She never brought up the trip again. Not out of avoidance, but because she didn't need to. Her life wasn't about what had been taken from her anymore, it was about what she'd reclaimed. She started mailing postcards to herself from places she wanted to go. "Manifesting," she'd say with a wink. The fridge slowly filled with notes from Italy, Greece, and Japan, written in her neat handwriting. "You are brave. You are allowed joy. You still have time." One afternoon, As snowflakes tapped gently against the window, she looked up from her crossword and said, "You know, I thought being left behind would break me, but maybe it was what I needed to stop waiting and start living." I didn't respond, just reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Because sometimes the most powerful trips don't begin at airports or end in photo albums. Sometimes they begin the moment we decide we're enough, even when the people we love forget to tell us so. Sometimes the people we trust the most hurt us in ways we never expect. But Grandma's story shows us that being left behind doesn't mean we're lost. It can be the start of finding ourselves again. You deserve love that's honest and respect that's real. If you've ever felt overlooked or uninvited, let this be your reminder. You are worthy of joy, and it's never too late to choose yourself.